Hey everyone, it's Mambo. Welcome to my ultimate F-16 landing guide. Now, has this ever happened to you? No, 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 no. Or this? Oh shit, come on, stop, 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 stop. No, no. Eject. And I know it's a bit extreme, but maybe even this? Well, you've come to the right place. Let's start. So I'm assuming you want your landings to look something like that. Stick with me throughout this guide and I'll teach you all the tools I use to land the F-16 in DCS world. First, we'll need to cover one very important term, which is angle of attack or AOA. Angle of attack, and I'll try to keep this simple, is the angle between the direction of the wind and the chord line of the aircraft's wing, which is basically where the wing is pointing towards. It's important to remember that your angle of attack is not your direction of flight. As you can see in this image of myself right before landing, my wing's chord line is pointing roughly this way, and because I'm descending, the direction of the relative wind is roughly this way. The angle between the two will be my angle of attack. Alright, just remember this for later. For now, let's move on to setting up the controls you'll need. Okay, here we are in the control setup window, and the first thing you'll need to search for is SPD, BRK, or of course speed brake. These functions work best when bound to a 3 or 2-way switch or hat, and we will focus on the top 3 options there. Of course, each of you is going to have their own set of HOTAS and controls, so I can't exactly tell you what to put it on, but I will go over what I have it set to. So let's go for the first function, which is aft extend momentary, which, as the name suggests, is the extend button for the speed brakes. When you press and hold it, this will extend it and open it like so. Next up is the forward retract, which again, as the name suggests, is the retraction and closing button. So when you press it, it will close the speed brakes like so. Note that the retraction button doesn't need to be held in because it's not momentary in comparison to the extend switch. And lastly, the third one, which is the off, will let you to stop whatever function you started and kind of put the speed brake in an in-between position, not fully open and not fully closed, like so. Next up, search for trim button, and here it is very much more straightforward. It is best to bind this to a 4-way hat with left wing down and right wing down, the first and last options being bound to the left for left wing down and right for right wing down. And then, very importantly, nose down, second option, is an up on the hat switch, and nose up is a down on the hat switch. Sounds a little bit weird, but when you think about it, you pull on the stick to go up and you push on the stick to go down, and the same applies here. Now, this is more of a suggestion, but search for seat ADG switch, which is of course seat adjustment switch, and if you can spare an up and down switch on your stick or throttle, that's going to be great. I do. If you don't, we can just use the virtual switch. Basically, as we raise the angle of attack, it's going to be hard for us to see what's in front of us, so we're going to just raise the seat and you'll see it later. And now for the last 3 and most important buttons, you can go ahead and like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. And we're back in the simulator. So right before we head into that landing, I want you to notice one little rule of thumb that I follow in my landings that will very much help you. Notice that we're at 6,000 feet, or just about, and just below 20 miles out of the waypoint I have on the runway. This follows my rule of thumb of 300 feet per mile away from the runway. You don't have to calculate for every mile out. What I do instead is I just remember what is 5, 10, 15, and 20. So let's say 5 is 1,500, 10 is 3,000, 15 is 4,500, and 20 is, just like now, 6,000 feet. What this does is put you on a glide slope for a descent of 3 degrees straight onto the runway. If you look on my HUD, if this is -5 degrees and this is 0 degrees, you see that the runway right here in the waypoint is placed roughly in that 3 degrees down. If this is 2.5, this will be 3. Right, so this is the optimal angle for an approach onto a runway, and this works for, as far as I know, any fixed wing or conventional fixed wing aircraft. So from my experience, it doesn't matter what you fly in DCS, whether it's the A-10 or Hornet or Tomcat, it doesn't matter. You can follow this rule and it will lead you to a beautiful approach onto your runway. One last thing before we go, let's take a look at the bottom left of this panel where it says speed brake. You can see a little window that says closed. Now, if I pull on the switch aft to extend, you can see it switches to these 9 dots. If I push it to close, you can see it will switch back to close. This is how you can reference if your speed brake is closed or open, as well as you can slightly hear it, or you can look back and see like that it's opened or closed. But the easiest solution is just look down and see if it's closed or opened. Right, let's start the approach. So what I'm gonna do is point on that 3 degrees down on the runway, and also drop my throttle to start slowing down. And you will see as I get closer and closer, if I keep my descent on the 3 degrees down, it will keep following that rule of thumb I mentioned of 300 feet per mile.
Altitude. Altitude.
Let's see, so 15, as I said, 15 is 4,500. Yep, we're just about there, just slightly high. But again, it's not a precise rule, it's more of a it's in the area, so it doesn't have to be exactly there. Now I'm getting closer and closer to 10 miles out, so I will open my speed brake to start decelerating faster. And below 290 on your airspeed, or more correctly below 250, you can drop your gear. That should happen at around 10 miles out. As you can see, I did it 11, but that's completely fine. And now comes the next part of the landing. You can see that there's now this new bracket on my HUD. What I want to do is bring it up by pitching the nose up, but I'm not going to do it by pulling on the stick. Instead, I'm going to use the trim that we bound earlier to bring it up, because I don't want to keep holding my stick at that position. I want the trim to hold it there for me. So I'm going to unpause and start bringing up the trim. Start bringing the nose up, so I'm pushing down on the trim. There we go. And you can see that it's getting slightly hard to see what's in front of me now. So I'm going to look at this switch right here and bring my seat up. And now this is much better. I also have it on my throttle, so I don't have to look down. But you don't have to do that. Now let's talk about the bracket again. This is just my way of doing it, but I aim for the top third of the bracket. The reason I aim there and not the center of it is because just before the landing, I'm going to do what's called a flare, which is a slight pull on the stick to slow down the descent. And that's going to push it slightly up and put me on the optimal center, which is also represented by this green circle or donut here. Right, so I'm slightly below that top third, so I'm gonna actually unpause and push my trim up. I'm also getting slightly slow and almost stalling. Another thing that happens when you trim the aircraft for the landing is that you stop pulling, you start moving the stick forward and backwards. What you do instead is control your altitude by using the throttle. So if I want to drop my altitude, I drop the throttle and you'll see that my nose pitches down. And if I want to go up, I will add on that throttle. Now I need to add a little bit more trim. Just use quick taps when trimming and keep following that rule. Let's see, where are we? 7 should be 2100, so we're just about there. A little bit more trim. Let's zoom in slightly and see. Yep, that looks good. As I get closer, I will make more corrections. Right, and now I'm not moving my stick backwards and forwards at all. I'm only moving it left and right and using the throttle to pitch up and down. Let's check again. 5 miles out, or just about 5 miles out, 1,500. That looks very good. Again, it doesn't have to be precise. It's a general rule for your landings. Also, you can practice just flying it stable like that with your gear out and trimmed out, and see how you handle that, because that's a very important part of the approach. Okay, what I'm gonna do now, and let's pause this one last time, is aim at the beginning of the runway while keeping it at that 3 degrees. Right now I'm ever so slightly too high. I want this 2.5 degrees to be roughly here, that big box, if you can see it on the runway. We're gonna see it as we get closer. And my velocity vector just below the 2.5 at the beginning of the runway. So let's keep going. Only using the throttle to pitch up and down now. Stick only goes left and right. But again, as I get over the runway, I'm gonna drop the throttle ever so slightly to descend onto the runway. Pull on the stick slightly to do that flare I mentioned and slow down my descent for a softer landing. And just before I touch down, I'm gonna give the throttle a little push just to, again, slow down that descent for a smooth landing. Right, aiming at the beginning of the runway. Slightly too high, there we go, aiming at it again. And now I'm gonna start pulling on the stick slightly and dropping the throttle. There we go, more on the stick. And smooth touchdown, even slightly too smooth. There we go. And very important in the F-16, keep your nose up. Keep your nose up. Try to keep that donut on the left. As you get too slow to keep the nose up, it will drop. And now slam the brakes. Let's lower the seat. And once the speed zeroes out, you can turn on your nose wheel steering using the nose wheel steering button. And let's also close this speed brake. Perfect. And there we go. Smooth landing with a good approach. Now you can go ahead and just taxi out of the runway. And now that we're on the taxiway, let's switch to our taxi lights. I have it on the throttle, but it's located right here. So I was in landing lights. Switch to taxi. As you saw in the landing I just performed, I landed very close to the beginning of the runway, not at the beginning, to make sure I don't land before it, but just over the beginning. And also that keeping the nose up to slow down basically uses the entire airframe of the F-16 as a big speed brake and slows it down aerodynamically. And that will help you very much with making sure you don't overrun the runway and crash on the other side of it like you saw in the intro. But here are some other F-16s parking, so I'll just slot right in here. There we go. Let's turn the lights off and the parking brake on. There we go. Good landing. But Mambo, I don't usually have a waypoint guiding me onto the runway like that. What do we do then, you may ask? Let me show you just that. So we're in this situation right now. I don't have any waypoints, and the runway is somewhere on my left. How do I know that? Press F10 to go into your map. Out a bit. You can see that to my left there's Nellis Air Force Base. This is where I want to land. Now, how do I get more accurate heading towards it? Use the ruler tool at the top right there. Right click on yourself and right click on the airfield. The heading is 242, but don't immediately go to 242 on your HUD. The difference between the heading on the HUD is that it's magnetic and on the map it's true. How do we get true heading? List, and to go into INS press 6. There you go. Right now it's flashing and bugging a little bit because I have this paused, but this will give us the true heading that we're at. So I'm going to unpause and turn left until this true heading right here says 242, not the HUD. Let's go. Right here we're coming up on 242. The runway should be in front of me. Let's see. It's not right in front of me. I can see it to the left. Why is that? Because by the time it took me to land, to turn left, now it's at 233. So let's go to 233. 233. There you go. Runway straight ahead. But you can see that the runway is not aligned with me. It's to my left. So what I'm going to do is fly until it's almost perpendicular to me, to the right, and then turn into it. At the same time, I'm already starting to drop my speed and my altitude just so I don't have to correct them too late. Right, the runway is almost perpendicular to me, so I'm going to start heading into it. And definitely drop the speed because I'm getting closer and closer to it as I'm doing this. There we go, now I'm aligned with the runway. I don't have the range to it. How do I know that I'm on a proper approach? All I'm going to do is make sure the beginning of the runway, as we did last time, is at that 3 degrees. Right now I can see that its heights around the 4 degrees. I'm going to bring it down by pointing below where the runway is. Let's drop the gear. Open the speed brakes. You can see that the 2.5 degrees line is almost at the end of the runway when I want it at the beginning of it. It's way off. Again, trimming and using the throttle for altitude for now, right now. It goes up. I'm still coming in too high, so I'm gonna let myself drop just a bit. Now this looks good. I put it at roughly the 3 degrees. Now I'm gonna start doing the same thing we did. Aim at the beginning of the runway while keeping the 2.5 lines in the beginning of the runway as well, just above where I'm aiming. Because again, I want to approach at 3 degrees, not at 2.5. Go, just flying it stable again. Stick only goes left and right. Throttle does the rest. Right, I'm over the runway. Start to flare and drop the throttle. There we go. Smooth touchdown and keep the nose up. Keep the nose up. Keep the nose up. And stay on the center line. As soon as I'm too slow to keep the nose up, slam the brakes. I'm still pulling on my stick as hard as I can. That helps a lot with slowing down. There you go. Airspeed zeroed out, so I'm going to turn on nose wheel steering and close the speed brake. That is it. Smooth landing with the F-16. Now just switch to taxi lights. That should do it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned from this and this will help you make your F-16 landings a lot more precise and smooth. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and share it. And if you need any further help, make sure to join my Discord, link in the description, and I'll be there to help you with whatever you'd need. See ya guys, land safely.